Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my latest video. It's been over about a week since you guys have last seen me. I'm back in town, so I'm back to start pumping out some videos for you guys over the next few weeks in the lead up to drafts. What I'm actually going to go ahead and do, I thought I was going to wait a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead and do my position tiers. Way I view it is if any injuries happen or if any trades happen that would impact the fantasy relevance for players, I will just address that in a single video throughout the month of August. So that's my plan because I was gonna wait just in case like injuries happen or whatever. But I just wanted to go ahead and get this out for you guys because I do know some people do have early drafts in August as well. So with that being said, I'm going to start with the quarterback position, just like I did in my late round targets. I'm gonna go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. For today's video on the quarterbacks, I basically got my top 24 quarterbacks for fantasy football heading into the season. Now I got these broken up in different tiers. Now in the tier sections, I got them kind of ranked how I view them. But this isn't like a 1 through 24 ranking because some of these players you might have to go higher than some, and some of these players I'm very high on, you might be able to get them in later rounds as well too. So yeah, let me just go ahead and dive into today's video. The first tier of quarterbacks I'm going to be speaking about, these are just basically quarterbacks I trust to draft very high tier. These are quarterbacks, if I leave the draft with them, I'm going to plug them into my starting quarterback spot. I don't think I need a backup quarterback option for these guys, so I can use my bench options for other positions. With that being said, these are the quarterbacks I'm looking to target high in drafts: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels. Now, if you guys did watch my late round targets, I talked about guys that were in the top 10 in certain stats. I'm not going to do that for this video just because that would make this video very long if I talked about each individual stat each of these 24 quarterbacks might have appeared in. But one thing I do is after I collect the production from the last 3 seasons, I try to find 1 to 4 players that fit certain stats over the last 3 regular seasons. These quarterbacks, of course, popped up on that. Starting with Josh Allen, he's 1 of 4 quarterbacks that have at least 10 regular season games where they finish with 200 plus passing yards and 35 plus rushing yards. He's also 1 of 4 quarterbacks in the NFL with at least 20 regular season games where he finished with 245 plus passing yards and 2 plus passing touchdowns. And he's also 1 of 4 quarterbacks that average over 220 passing yards per game and 30 rushing yards per game. And that's a minimum of 17 starts for that stat. With Lamar Jackson, he's 1 of the 4 quarterbacks that have at least 10 regular season games where they finish with 200 plus passing yards and 35 plus rushing yards. He's also 1 of 4 quarterbacks that average over 220 passing yards per game and 30 rushing yards per game as well. And then for Joe Burrow, he is 1 of 4 quarterbacks who average over 235 passing yards per game, have at least 60 plus passing touchdowns, and less than 30 interceptions since 2022. He is also 1 of the 4 quarterbacks that in the NFL that have at least 20 regular season games where he finished with at least 245 passing yards and 2 plus passing touchdowns since 2022. And he's 1 of 4 quarterbacks who average over 265 passing yards per game, have at least a 67 completion percentage, and at least 70 plus passing touchdowns since 2022. Now, Patrick Mahomes, he wasn't the Patrick Mahomes of fantasy quarterbacks of last year, but I'm gonna go ahead and say this: I think he can bounce back and easily finish as a top 5 quarterback. So that's why I do have him in this tier, even though he kind of had a letdown fantasy season last year. With that being said, he is 1 of the 4 quarterbacks that have at least 20 regular season games where he finished with 245 plus passing touchdowns and 245 plus passing yards and 2 plus passing touchdowns. And he is 1 of the 4 quarterbacks that average over 265 passing yards per game, have at least a 67% completion percentage, and at least 70 plus passing touchdowns since 2022. Jalen Hurts, you know he's going to get those tush-push touchdowns, so that's why you can trust him. He's going to get those touchdowns, which can rack up fantasy points, and he can run the ball. He is one of the 4 quarterbacks that have at least 10 regular season games where they finished with 200-plus passing yards and 35-plus rushing yards since 2022, and he's one of the 4 quarterbacks that average over 220 passing yards per game and 30 rushing yards per game since 2022 as well. And then Jayden Daniels, one thing I will say is I do trust to draft him high. I won't want to, if I do lead the draft with Jayden Daniels, I'm still not going to pick up a backup option. But with that being said, it is the back of my mind that he could maybe have a CJ Stroud like sophomore slump where he's not as highly productive in fantasy. Like we saw that drop off from Stroud's production in last year. But I still trust him because of his rushing floor that gives him a high floor as a fantasy quarterback. And speaking of that, this is kind of wild because he only has 1 regular season. And the stats I'm talking about, this is over the last 3 regular seasons. Jayden Daniels is still one of the only 4 quarterbacks since 2022 that has at least 10 regular season games where he finished with 200 plus passing yards and 35 plus rushing yards, which is a great thing to keep in mind if you want to leave the draft with Jayden Daniels. Moving into this next tier, these are basically quarterbacks that I take the leap with tier. So what do I mean I take the leap with tier? These are quarterbacks where if I do draft them, I'm not going to draft a backup option. If these guys hit their floor, I'm just going to have to suck it up and try to find somebody off waivers or maybe make a trade for a new quarterback option. These are guys where I can see themselves propelling themselves by the end of the year to finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. With that being said, it's Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, and CJ Stroud. Baker Mayfield, he's got so many passing options, a loaded wide receiver room, especially once Chris Godwin is able to return to action. I think I'm not the only one that's very high on what Baker Mayfield and this Bucs offense can be this year. They have a potential to be a top 5 offense as a whole. And with him having so many options in the wide receiver corps in Tampa Bay, he also has Cade Otton as a tight end. He's got Bucky Irving where he can just dump it off to Bucky Irving, and Bucky Irvin's got the capability to just get chunk 10 to 20 yard gains and get those receiving touchdowns as well. Jordan Love, I'm not going to go into him in deep. I actually talked to him about him in quarterbacks that draft late in the late round video. Go back and watch that video if you want to hear my full thoughts on Jordan Love, as well as CJ Stroud. I talked about him as well, where I'm looking for him to have a bounce back year. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on CJ Stroud, please go back to my top 5 quarterbacks to target late round video. And then lastly, Kyler Murray. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. This is my last year I'm taking the leap with Kyler Murray. Like he has been a letdown. It's like he has the talent to finish I still think he has the talent to finish as a number 1 fantasy quarterback, but this is the last year I'm going to take a chance on that. With that being said, Kyler Murray is actually one of the 4 quarterbacks since 2022 that averages over 220 passing yards per game and 30 rushing yards per game. And again, that's a minimum of 17 starts among all quarterbacks in the NFL. Moving into this next tier of players, these are my high floor quarterback tiers. These quarterbacks on this list that you're seeing, these are quarterbacks where I think they're very safe options for you. They might not be league winners, but they're going to give you a steady flow of points throughout the season. Some of these quarterbacks I do think have the potential to maybe push with a high ceiling, but I just think they're more of a safer option. They just have a higher floor compared to like the previous 4 quarterbacks I talked about in that tier. With that being said, the high floor quarterbacks I like this year: Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Justin Fields, Tua Tagovailoa, and Matthew Stafford. Just kind of running down that list. First of all, Dak Prescott and Trevor Lawrence. They were 2 of the 5 quarterbacks I talked about drafting in your later rounds video. If you want to hear my full thoughts on them, I do ask you to go back and watch that video. Justin Herbert, he is one of the 4 quarterbacks who averaged over 235 passing yards per game, have 60 plus passing touchdowns and less than 30 interceptions since 2022. Herbert does potentially, like as a player, he has a high ceiling, but it's just Jim Harbaugh's like run first offensive thought is why that's why I have him in a high floor tier. Jared Goff, right? He's been one of the most highly productive quarterbacks over the last 3 seasons, but with the change from Ben Johnson going to Chicago, I wonder if his ceiling does drop, so that's why I do have him as a high floor option. With that being said, he's one of the 4 quarterbacks in the NFL with at least 20 regular season games where he finished with 245 plus passing yards and 2 plus passing touchdowns over the last 3 years. And he's also one of the 4 quarterbacks who average over 265 passing yards per game, have at least a 67% completion percentage, and at least 70 passing touchdowns over the last 3 regular seasons. Brock Purdy, he's just in a good, solid offense where I think you can trust him as a high floor option for you. With that being said, he is one of the 4 quarterbacks over the last 3 regular seasons who average over 235 passing yards per game, have at least 60 plus passing touchdowns, and less than 30 interceptions. With Bo Nix, there's a potential he can continue to ascend. The reason why I don't think he has a high ceiling is I still think he needs a little bit more of a potent offense. I think there just needs to be more playmakers in the offense. There's a potential where that could happen for Bo Nix this year, but I just view him as a high floor option because of his rushing ability. With Justin Fields, it's strictly his rushing ability, right? I just view him as a high floor because he's going to be able to run the ball with his legs. I just don't really like. He's got Garrett Wilson. I just don't necessarily love all the passing options he's going to throw the ball to in New York, so that's why I don't think he really offers a high ceiling, even though now he's going to be a full-time starter in the with the Jets. With Tua Tagovailoa, I think if he can just finally start getting touchdowns, he might be able to get if he can at least increase his touchdown amount, I think he can potentially have a high ceiling as a fantasy quarterback. With that being said, he's one of 4 quarterbacks who average over 235 passing yards per game, have 60 plus passing touchdowns, and less than 30 interceptions since 2022. And he's one of the 4 quarterbacks who average over 265 passing yards, have at least a 67% completion percentage, and at least 70 plus passing touchdowns since 2022. And of course, the biggest thing you do have to worry about Tua is him staying healthy if you're going to draft him. Then with Matthew Stafford, I do think Matthew Stafford does have a high ceiling, right? With Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua in that passing attack. But if you guys haven't been following along, he has not practiced yet in training camp. He is dealing with a back injury. He's kind of been dealing with injuries, right, over the last 3 regular seasons. I just don't know if you're going to be able to trust him for the full season to stay healthy. So that's why I view him as a high floor option where you can trust him when he's healthy to put him in your lineups. But you might want to have a backup option if you're going to want to have Stafford in your rosters this season. My last tier of quarterbacks, these are upside late round quarterback tiers. These are guys you can draft later in your drafts, and they could potentially have the potential as young players to finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Drake May is my top option on this list. I actually talked about him, how I feel about him more in depth on my late round quarterback video. Please go back and watch that if you have not yet. I don't want to repeat everything I've already said, especially for the people that listen to every video that I do send out there. With that being said, I think I'm very high on Bryce Young this year. I think the Panthers can surprise some people, maybe potentially push to win the NFC South. They drafted Ted McMillan. I think that's going to help him, give him a bigger red zone presence. And I really would not be surprised if we really see Bryce Young deliver on his talent this season, especially with how him and that Panthers team finished last year. Caleb Williams, basically the way I view it is if Ben Johnson can fix him and fix that Bears offense, and he can have even 70 to 80, no, I'd say 80 to 90% of what Jared Goff did once they fixed that in Detroit. You got a potential for him to reach his high ceiling as well. And again, I don't think I said it. These are all quarterbacks. Like, if you draft any of these quarterbacks I'm talking about right now, you're putting them on your bench to start the season. And then you're going to want to draft one of the high floor quarterbacks I just talked about. And then once these guys prove they can be a week in and week out option for you as your quarterback, you can make the switch there. JJ McCarthy, we really don't know what he's going to be in the NFL, but every time I see a clip lately, you don't want to feed into clips too much, right, from training camp. But every time I see a clip, this kid is slinging it in training camp for the Vikings. He's making these bomb touchdowns to Jordan Addison. And that's the biggest thing, is he's in a potential offense to go off, right? Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. They got TJ Hawkinson. He can dump it off to Aaron Jones. I mean, and then he's got Kevin O'Connell as the head coach. We saw what Kevin O'Connell did that year when Kirk Cousins got hurt, and they had to circulate between quarterbacks, and that offense was still producing. So if JJ McCarthy can, live up to his top 10 status as a draft pick, he has the potential to be a high ceiling quarterback in his this is basically his true rookie season, since wasn't able to play last year, since he got hurt in the preseason. My last guy, Cam Ward, he's a number 1 overall pick. He's going very late in drafts. They got Calvin Ridley, Van Jefferson. They got Tyler Lockett, Chig Okonkwo as far as passing options. I'm a fan of what Tajay Spears can provide for them in the passing attack. So he's a number 1 pick for a reason, right? So with that being said, I do think there's a potential where he can be a fantasy relevant quarterback, because he's another quarterback that does have he's mobile, right? So he has a rushing floor. There is one quarterback I might talk about later that I excluded from this list, even though it sounds like he's putting together a good training camp thus far. Potentially Anthony Richardson could slide into this tier, but remember I talked about at the beginning of this video how if like anything happens, trades or injuries could happen. What I decided to do with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones and the Colts offense as a whole, once we know who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Colts, I'll just put together like a 5 to 15 minute video as far as what that means for fantasy football whenever we do get that news here at some point in August. With that being said, that is today's video. These are my quarterback tiers. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. As always, please make sure you do subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can keep up with all my latest videos. Also, do follow me on all my other platforms, whether it's on X, TikTok, or Instagram. I'm going to hop off here. As far as my next video, you guys will be getting the running back tiers. I am shooting to get that out to you guys ideally on Saturday. If anything comes up as far as personal plans with my life, maybe I want to get it out to you guys at least by Sunday, if not even by Friday evening, depending on what happens with me this weekend. With that being said, you guys enjoy your week. I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.